Sometimes even the most amazing of fairy tales have a very dark side to them. And that's exactly true for our today's story. When people say that something is too good to be true, that's because most of the time it really is. And what is perfect for us might not be so great for the others. If you are new to my channel, then I hope you like scary true stories based on true events, because that's all I am about. I release a brand new episode every Friday, and remember that everything you hear on this channel has actually happened in real life. Also, a lot of the content I talk about tends to be very graphic, so please bear that in mind before you go viewing any of my content. Today's story is called The First Woman, and let's dive right into it. It was the year 1950, and in the small town of Kunratice in Czechoslovakia, a tall, dark-haired young man named Antonín Janku was beaming with joy. He finally found the courage to ask his girlfriend Zdenka Mizerovska to marry him, and she said yes. The pair began hugging and kissing, and immediately started making plans for their future together. Antonín, who worked at the local machinery joint called Elektropraga, met his fiancée through her father at work. Her dad worked on the same team as Antonín, and because Antonín was so liked and was a hard worker, he was quickly recognized as being a potential suitor for Zdenka. And a few months later, the couple was practically inseparable. They both introduced one another to their families and friends, and it seemed like everyone was really rooting for these two. Antonín was even asked if he wanted to rent a room in Zdenka's parents' family home. And so he packed his bags and soon enough was living on the first floor of Zdenka's parents' house, just across the hall from his girlfriend. So life really did seem just perfect for them two. A year later, in 1951, Antonín got a letter from the army. It used to be a custom that every able-bodied man would join the army for a few years, and then he would just return back to the life he had led before. It was sort of a way of life. Not only did the boys get training in guns and fighting, but also picked up a number of other life skills like cooking, cleaning, and generally being able to look after themselves. It really toughened one's character, and most of the time, the young man actually made lifelong friends like that. Antonín opened his letter and was surprised to find an offer to the academy. This would mean that he would need to temporarily relocate, but it would also give him a better chance of getting a higher paid job once he was finished. Antonín called Zdenka over and explained the situation to her. She wasn't the happiest that he needed to leave so soon, but equally she understood that this was a great opportunity for Antonín, and it would likely mean a better future life for them, and so she gave him her blessing. Antonín smiled, immediately wrote his acceptance letter, and went on to mail it. And a few weeks later, he was packing his bags and relocating to Lipník nad Bečvou, which was at the opposite side of the country, about 4.5 hours on the train. As the months ticked by, Antonín was really enjoying his time at the academy. He made tons of friends and was getting fitter by the day. Antonín was never really in a bad shape, but now he could run for miles, and he has even put on some muscle that he had never really had before. Himself and several of his friends would spend their free time sparring, and Antonín was actually getting good at it. His friends would even begin making fun of him, telling him that he should become a professional fighter once the academy was over. Antonín usually just shook his head and gave them a little smile, but secretly, he was really enjoying all this new strength and agility he was building. And so the time at the academy was going great for Antonín. And whenever he got the time, he would always take the train back to visit his fiancée. And those moments with Zdenka gave Antonín the strength to continue on with his training, because he felt like it was really all going to be worth it, and it wouldn't be too long before he and Zdenka could be together forever. In the winter of 1952, Antonín got yet another permission to leave the academy for a few days, and because he was inching towards Christmas, he could really not wait to get home. He even made a little horse he carved out of a piece of wood. Now, it wasn't the most of amazing things he has ever done, but Antonín was still happy with it, and he couldn't wait to give it to Zdenka for Christmas. And so the next day, Antonín grabbed his bag and hurried towards the train station. And several hours later, he gave Zdenka a big hug as she came to meet him at the station. The couple then happily walked back to her parents' house, where they joined Zdenka's parents for a delicious lunch her mother had prepared. The day after Christmas, the couple woke up early. Zdenka, who was still admiring the small wooden horse she had gotten for Christmas, asked her fiancé if he wanted to go out for a walk, and Antonin said yes. They both ate a really big dinner the day before, and so some exercise was really needed. And while Antonin was really enjoying some time off, he was also kind of starting to miss his training and sparring regime, and so he was happy that Zdenka suggested this. Antonin's fiancé smiled at him and kissed him, and then they both got dressed and headed downstairs for a quick breakfast. Not too long after that, they were walking out of the house towards a small forest nearby. They were about half an hour into their walk when suddenly a complete stranger leaped from behind one of the trees and swung at Antonin with a heavy metal pipe. Antonin managed to duck away, grabbed the pipe, and with all his strength pushed against the man who tried attacking him. The two men continued to struggle for a bit, but then Antonin's training kicked in and he overpowered the man very quickly, pinning him down on the ground and restraining his arms. The man began shouting that he was sorry and that he made a mistake, and so Antonin, after a while, decided it was safe to let him go. The man composed himself and sheepishly said that he was really sorry for scaring the couple like that, but he was actually waiting on a thief who had been stealing his firewood. He continued to apologize, and Antonin said not to worry about it, that luckily nobody got hurt and that was the end of that. But Zdenka seemed really shaken and upset by this, and so Antonin decided to end their walk and return to the house. The couple had only one more day together, and so they soon forgot about the whole incident and were focused on one another again. The following morning, Zdenka walked Antonin back to the train station, kissed him goodbye, and fought tears as the train started to pull out. Several months later, on 4th of March of 1953, Antonin was visiting his fiancée again. The couple decided to cook a meal together and have a nice dinner at home. When they were finished, Zdenka asked Antonin if it were okay for him to sleep downstairs in the kitchen, since her parents weren't home. Antonin said that yep, that was no problem at all, kissed Zdenka goodnight, and settled himself on the sofa bed that was positioned in the corner of the kitchen. It was the middle of the night when Antonin heard some strange noises from behind him. It sounded like someone was dragging their feet on the wooden floor, moving closer to where Antonin was sleeping. And then, when Antonin opened his eyes, he saw a dark figure hunched over him. And before Antonin could do anything, something heavy and blunt struck him between his eyes. Antonin was stunned, and he didn't understand what was happening to him. And so with all his strength, he tried getting off the bed to confront the person. But as he sat up and raised his arm, the perpetrator swung for Antonin's head once again. Antonin could hear an audible crack as his skull gave away, and with that, he lost his balance, fell off the sofa bed onto the floor, and everything went black. It would turn out that most of the things in Antonin's life were pure lies. Yes, he was a soldier in training, and yes, he was engaged to be married to Zdenka, but what Antonin didn't know that Zdenka was actually not in love with him anymore. And so every time he would come to visit her, she would pretend like everything was okay and that they were both so happy, but deep down, her feelings for Antonin were completely gone. When Antonin went to join the academy, Zdenka felt quite lonely, and so she started attending all the parties that she could get invited to. And soon, at her best friend's wedding, she met another man called Rudolf Lang. The new pair hit it off right away and began spending all their free time together. Zdenka soon found out that Rudolf had never been with a woman before, and so their relationship was platonic at first. But several weeks later, when Zdenka asked Rudolf over to her place, they did ended up sleeping together and sort of became official from there on. But of course, all of this was happening when Antonin was away undergoing his training, and he had no idea that his relationship was already over. Zdenka would later confess that she didn't want to hurt Antonin's feelings by breaking up with him, but equally, things between herself and Rudolf were getting pretty serious. And so, one morning, after Zdenka spent yet another night with Rudolf, she decided that the best way forward was to get rid of Antonin, and the way they were going to do that was by simply killing him. Zdenka began planning the murder right away, and she even got her new boyfriend and her best friend Božena involved in all of this. It would take her months before she would finally get to realize her plan. At first, Zdenka thought that she could just buy some cyanide in the local pharmacy and poison Antonin that way, but she didn't actually manage to find it anywhere because, as you can imagine, such a dangerous substance is not sold just anywhere, and so she needed to come up with another plan. So herself, Rudolf and Božena were talking about other possible ways to kill Antonín. Maybe they could just point-blank shoot him. Or perhaps it would be better if Rudolf jumped Antonín somewhere quiet and beat him to death. It is also important to note that during all this time, Zdenka's own parents, who were so fond of Antonín, they actually ended up overhearing one of the murder conversations. And they didn't do anything. They didn't try to stop their daughter, they didn't contact Antonín to warn him, and they didn't even tell the police. They just completely looked away. A few months later, the murder trio decided what their next plan was. That is when Zdenka asked Antonín to join her on that early morning walk, and Antonín was attacked by the strange man with a metal pipe. This was, of course, Rudolf, and he just couldn't believe how strong Antonín was. He only managed to get away from Antonín by quickly coming up with that story of someone stealing his firewood so that Antonín would let him go. But then, on the 4th of March 1953, Antonín would finally meet his tragic ending. Earlier on that day, Zdenka asked Rudolf over, and she told him to hide up in the attic and wait for her signal. She said to him that Antonín would be sleeping downstairs in the kitchen that night, and that she would come back to tell Rudolf after Antonín would have fallen asleep. Then Zdenka grabbed the axe that was propped against one of the wooden beams and gave it to Rudolf to use as the murder weapon. Rudolf took it from her, the pair kissed, and then Zdenka walked downstairs to start preparing everything for that evening. Several hours later, when Antonín and Zdenka had finished their dinner, Zdenka waited for Antonín to fall asleep and then went upstairs to the attic to tell Rudolf that he was good to go. Rudolf crept slowly downstairs, making sure that he was not making any sound. When he got to the kitchen, he held his breath and inched his way towards the sofa bed where Antonín was now fast asleep. As Rudolf got closer, he suddenly saw Antonín's eyes open, and, afraid that Antonín would subdue him again, with the blunt side of the axe, he quickly swung for Antonín's forehead. He hit him right in the middle of his eyes, and the axe made a small dent into Antonín's skull, tearing the skin apart. Blood spattered everywhere. It stained Rudolf, the walls, and even the curtains in the window. Rudolf shuddered but raised the axe one more time, but then he saw that Antonín was getting up, and so before Antonín could do anything else, Rudolf, with all his might, made the mortal strike, completely cracking Antonín's skull open. As Antonín's body hit the floor, blood started to pour out of his mouth, but Rudolf just stood there. He didn't really know what to do. He was completely floored by what he had just done. He had to compose himself for a bit, and then stepped over Antonín's dead body and walked upstairs to tell Zdenka that it had been done. Zdenka then came into the kitchen to make sure that Antonín was really dead, and then locked the door, returned to the first floor to Rudolf, and they both climbed into the bed and slept till the morning. The following day, the pair returned to the kitchen and started with the cleanup. They wrapped up Antonín's body in a duvet and dragged it into the storage room. Then Zdenka made sure the kitchen was spotless and cleaned off all the blood spatter that was practically everywhere they looked. But then the front door opened and Zdenka's parents returned home. Zdenka thought that they might be in huge trouble now, but to her surprise, Zdenka's mother just said, "Well, now you've really done it." And then the mother went on to wash the bloody duvet covers, and the father came up with the idea of bringing in a dog with puppies to cover up the smell that could be later detected. The group then stripped Antonín of all his clothes and also among themselves divided whatever possessions Antonín still had on him. The next step was to get rid of Antonín's body, to which Rudolf suggested that him and Zdenka take an axe each and from the torso cut off Antonín's head, arms and legs. When this was done, the pair then wrapped up those body parts in 3 large bags. They then placed each bag into a basket and carried it away from the house to a sinkhole near the factory. But they only managed to dispose of the bag with Antonín's torso into the sinkhole because someone walked by, and so the pair didn't want to return to that place just in case the person was now watching them. And so Zdenka and Rudolf decided to throw the other 2 bags into the nearby river. For days, the pair really thought that they might have actually gotten away with everything. But about a week later, a man in town over spotted a couple of large bags on the riverbank, and so he walked over to them and prodded them. But to his surprise, one of the bags tore open, and out of it fell a human leg. The man screamed and ran away to call the police. The officers then secured and searched the area. They quickly identified the legs, head and arms to be of the missing soldier that everyone had been looking for. They also found the initials MRK21, which later would be connected to the father, Rudolf Mizerovsky, and his address of 21 Kundratice. These initials would then lead the police to the house, where they searched it and also arrested Zdenka, her parents, and Božena. When the police interviewed Zdenka, she insisted that she had nothing to do with the murder. But Rudolf actually ended up confessing to everything, and he also provided a detailed account of what really happened, and so there was no question about who was or was not involved in Antonin's murder. And so, at the age of only 22 years old, Zdenka Mizerovska became the first woman in Czechoslovakia to be sentenced to death by hanging. Rudolf's sentence was the same, and both were carried out in the infamous Pankrácz prison in Prague on the 7th of November 1953. It was the day after both killers were denied their pardon. As for the other 3 people involved, Zdenka's best friend Božena was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and Zdenka's parents, Rudolf and Marie, were each sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. And so this brings us to the end of our story. Personally, I know how hard it can be to break up with someone, but equally, this was a very drastic measure. Obviously, the people all involved must have had some real psychological issues and were clearly not well. But you tell me what you think about it all. For your sake, I hope you've never been in a situation like that before. But equally, if you've ever been, then please share the story with us. I will be posting a new video next Friday, but in the meantime, there's another story I think you'd really like, so I'll leave a link to it up there. Until next time.